The wind came down off the bitter roots like a living thing, cold enough to crack sap in the pines and turn breath to ice before it left your lips. Elias Crow stood outside the trading post with his arms crossed, watching the road where it curved out of the timber and dropped toward the settlement. His beard was dark except where the frost had gotten into it. His eyes, gray as winter sky, didn't blink much. Behind him, men gathered. Too many men for a Tuesday. Word had spread. "Heard she's coming in today," someone said. "Mail order bride for Old Crow." Didn't think he had it in him. Elias didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge them. He'd lived 43 years on this mountain, buried a wife and son in the same week 6 years back, and learned that silence was cheaper than conversation. Let them talk. He'd stopped listening to men a long time ago. The stagecoach appeared first as a smudge of movement through the trees, then as the rattle of wheels and the snorting of horses laboring uphill. The driver, a thick-necked man named Goinens, had a face like he'd been chewing nails. When the coach lurched to a stop in front of the post, he didn't get down right away, just sat there, reins in hand, looking at Elias. "You Crow?" "I am." "Then God help you." Goin climbed down heavy like his knees hurt. He walked to the coach door, hesitated, then yanked it open. What came out wasn't what anyone expected. She was tall, taller than most of the women in Clearwater Ridge, thin but not frail. Her dress was gray wool, travel-stained and wrinkled. Her hands were bound at the wrists with rough cord, and over her head, a burlap sack, tied at the neck with twine. Pinned to her chest was a square of paper, handwritten in bold black ink, "Unfit for marriage. Buyer, beware." The crowd went silent. Then someone laughed, a short, ugly bark of sound that got picked up by two others. A woman gasped. A child asked a question his mother shushed immediately. Goins pulled the woman forward, not rough but not gentle either. She stumbled on the coach step, caught herself. Her breathing was audible through the sack, fast, shallow. "Delivery for Elias Crow," Goins said flatly. "Paid in full, per the arrangement. The agency sent a letter." He pulled a sealed envelope from his coat and held it out. Elias didn't take it. He was looking at the woman, at the way her shoulders were pulled in tight, at the way her bound hands were shaking. "Take the sack off," Elias said. "Can't. Orders from the agency. She's to stay hooded until you accept delivery or refuse it. If you refuse, she goes back to Denver. If you accept," Goins shrugged. "Your problem." "Well, what the hell kind of arrangement is that?" This from a man named Stillman, who ran the mill and thought that gave him opinions on everything. "The kind spelled out in a contract," Goins said. "Man pays for a bride, sight unseen, he gets what he gets. This one came with conditions." "What kind of conditions?" another voice called. "The kind that ain't your business." Elias stepped forward, close enough now to hear her breathing clearly, close enough to see the tremble in her hands wasn't just from cold. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. The sack moved. A pause. Then a voice, muffled but clear. "Elena." "Elena what?" Another pause. Longer. "Voss." "You come here of your own will, Elena Voss?" "Yes." No hesitation this time. "You know what you signed up for?" "I know." Elias reached into his coat, pulled out a folding knife, and cut the cord at her wrists. It fell into the mud. The crowd murmured. "I'm taking you home," he said. "You don't want that. Say so now." She didn't say anything, just stood there, hands free but still hidden under the sack, breathing. "Crow, you're out of your mind," Stillman said. "You don't know what's under there. Could be disease, could be none of your concern," Elias said without looking at him. He turned to Goins. "I accept delivery." Goins handed him the envelope. "Then she's yours. Good luck." He climbed back onto the coach, snapped the reins, and the horses pulled away, leaving Elena Voss standing in the mud with a sack on her head and a crowd staring at her like she was something dragged out of a river. Elias picked up his pack. "Come on." He started walking, didn't look back, just headed up the trail toward his cabin, 2 miles into the timber where the settlement couldn't see him and he couldn't see it. Behind him, footsteps. Uneven at first, then steadier. She was following. The crowd watched them go. Nobody said a word until they disappeared into the trees. Then the talking started, and it didn't stop for weeks. The cabin sat in a clearing where the pines broke enough to let in light, but not enough to let in wind. It was small, one room, a loft, a stone fireplace that Elias had built with his own hands the year after Margaret died. The roof didn't leak. The door closed tight. There was a woodshed, a smokehouse, and a creek 30 yards downslope that ran clear even in summer. Elias pushed the door open and stepped inside. The woman, Elena, stopped at the threshold. "You coming in or not?" he asked. She stepped inside, stood just past the door, hands at her sides, head still covered. Elias set his pack down, hung his coat on a peg, and moved to the fireplace. He built up the fire with practiced efficiency, kindling, split pine, a breath of air from the bellows. Flames caught and spread. Warmth began to fill the room. "Sit if you want," he said, nodding toward the table. She didn't sit, just stood there. Elias straightened, wiped his hands on his pants, and looked at her. Really looked. She was trembling again, not cold. She was close enough to the fire now, something else. "I'm going to take the sack off," he said. "That all right with you?" A pause. Then a nod. He stepped close. She flinched but didn't move away. He reached up slowly, found the twine knotted at her neck, and worked it loose. The sack slid off. Elias had seen a lot in his life. Seen men gutted by bears and still walking. Seen children dead from scarlet fever. Seen his wife's face the day she realized the cough wasn't going away. He didn't shock easy, but he'd expected something. Scars, maybe. Burns. Some visible mark that explained the label pinned to her chest. There was nothing. Elena Voss had a pale, narrow face with sharp cheekbones and a mouth that looked like it hadn't smiled in a long time. Her hair was dark, pulled back tight in a braid that had come half undone. Her eyes were gray-green, the color of river stones, and they didn't meet his. They stared past him, at the wall, at the floor, at nothing. "You're not disfigured," Elias said. "No." "Then what's unfit mean?" She didn't answer right away. Her jaw worked like she was chewing words she didn't want to swallow. "It means I'm used up," she said finally. "It means I'm broken. It means no decent man would want me, so they sent me to the frontier where standards are lower." Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like she was reading from a ledger. Elias grunted. "Standards aren't lower. Expectations are just different." "Is there a difference?" "Yeah. One's about what you deserve, the other's about what you can survive." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she was trying to figure out if he was mocking her. "You planning to hurt me?" she asked. "No." "You planning to use me?" "Not in any way you don't agree to." "Then why'd you pay for me?" Elias walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down heavy. He was tired. Tired of being alone, tired of talking, tired of the weight of silence in this cabin. "Because I'm tired of eating supper by myself," he said. "Because the winters are long and I'm sick of hearing my own voice. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a woman somewhere who'd rather be here than wherever she was." Elena stared at him. Her hands were still shaking. "That's it?" she said. "You just want company? That's it. You don't want—" She stopped, swallowed. "You're not expecting a—" "I'm expecting you to decide what you want," Elias said. "Could be you want to leave tomorrow. Could be you want to stay. Either way, you'll eat, you'll sleep warm, and you'll be safe. Beyond that, I don't have expectations." She didn't say anything, just stood there, swaying slightly, like the ground under her wasn't quite solid. "Sit down before you fall down," Elias said. She sat, hard, like her legs had just remembered they were tired. Elias stood, moved to the shelf, and pulled down a tin of dried venison and a loaf of bread he'd bought 2 days ago in the settlement. He set them on the table, poured water from a pitcher into 2 tin cups, and sat back down. "Eat," he said. She looked at the food like it might bite her. "I'm not hungry." "You're lying." Her eyes snapped to his. There was heat in them now. Anger. Good. Anger was better than that dead flatness. "How would you know?" "Because you look like you haven't eaten in a week and you're shaking like a leaf. Eat the damn food, Elena." She picked up a piece of bread, tore off a small corner, chewed slowly, then faster. Then she was eating like someone who'd forgotten what food tasted like, tearing into the venison and bread with both hands, barely breathing. Elias didn't watch. He stared into his cup and waited. When she finally stopped, there were crumbs on the table and her face was flushed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me for feeding you. That's just basic decency." "Not where I come from." Elias looked up. "Where do you come from?" She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Her eyes went distant again. "Denver," she said. "Before that, St. Louis. Before that," she trailed off. "It doesn't matter. It matters if it's following you." Her hand stopped moving. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something like fear. "What makes you think something's following me?" "Because nobody gets labeled unfit and sent to the frontier unless someone wants them gone," Elias said. "And people don't want you gone unless you're a problem, or you know something, or you took something." Elena's face went very still. "I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. Didn't say you did. But someone thinks you did, or you wouldn't be here." She stood up fast, chair scraping. "Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe, but you're still here. I can leave." "You can. Door's right there, 2 miles back to the settlement, another 8 to the nearest town with a stagecoach. You got money for fare?" She didn't answer. "Didn't think so." Elias stood slower. "Look, I'm not trying to trap you, but if you're running from something, I need to know what it is, because if it comes here, I need to be ready." Elena's hands curled into fists. Her breathing quickened. "I was married," she said finally. 3 years. To a man named Clayton Voss. He was... She stopped. Started again. He was rich, powerful, connected. And he was... She couldn't finish. Elias waited. "He hurt me," she said quietly. "Not in ways people could see, not in ways I could prove, but he hurt me. And when I finally tried to leave, he made sure no one would take me in. He told everyone I was a thief, that I'd stolen from him, that I was damaged goods." "Did you steal from him?" Her eyes flashed. "I took what was mine. Money I'd brought into the marriage. Money my father left me. Clayton tried to keep it, said it belonged to him now. I took it back." "How much?" "Enough to start over. Or it would have been if he hadn't frozen my accounts and spread lies about me to every respectable family in Denver." Elias sat back down, rubbed his jaw. "So the agency was my last option," Elena finished. "They didn't ask questions, just took a fee and said they'd find someone willing to take a woman with a complicated past. I thought..." Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe out here it wouldn't matter, that I could just disappear." "Nothing disappears," Elias said. "It just gets covered over for a while." "Then maybe I made a mistake coming here." "Maybe, but you're here now, and unless you've got a better plan, I'd suggest you stay until you do." Elena looked at him for a long time, searching his face for something, mockery, pity, anger. She didn't find any of it. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," Elias said. "And I know what it's like when nobody offers a hand." She sat back down, slowly. Her hands were still shaking, but less now. "I don't know how to be a wife," she said. "I don't know how to be a husband anymore. Guess we'll figure it out." Outside, the wind picked up. Snow had started to fall, light, dry flakes that hissed against the windows. The first snow of the season. By morning, the trail back to the settlement would be knee-deep. Elena looked toward the window, then back at Elias. "Where do I sleep?" she asked. "Loft's yours. I'll take the floor by the fire." "You don't have to see..." "Yeah, I do. You need space. I need to not be an ass. Works out for both of us." She almost smiled. Almost. It was gone before it fully formed, but Elias saw it. "Thank you," she said again. "Stop thanking me." "Can't. It's all I've got right now." Elias stood, pulled a wool blanket from a chest, and handed it to her. "Loft gets cold. There's more blankets up there if you need them. Outhouse is out back. Paths marked with stones. Don't go wandering at night. Cats come down from the high country this time of year." "Cats?" "Mountain lions. They don't usually bother people, but they're curious. Best not to test it." Elena took the blanket, held it like it was something precious. Good night, Elias. Good night, Elena. She climbed the ladder to the loft. He heard her moving around up there, boots coming off, the creak of the boards as she lay down. Then silence. Elias built up the fire, spread his own blanket on the floor, and lay down with his back to the hearth. He stared at the ceiling beams and listened to the wind. He'd brought a stranger into his home, a woman running from something, a woman who might bring trouble down on him. But he'd meant what he said. He was tired of being alone. And if trouble came, well, he'd handled worse. Outside, the snow kept falling. By morning, the world would be white and new, and the tracks leading to his cabin would be buried. For now, that was enough. The days fell into a rhythm. Elias woke before dawn, built up the fire, and headed out to check his trap lines. He'd come back mid-morning with whatever he'd caught, rabbits mostly, sometimes a fox or marten, and Elena would have coffee waiting. Not good coffee, but hot. She didn't talk much at first, just moved around the cabin like she was trying not to take up space. She'd clean things that didn't need cleaning, fold blankets that were already folded, stare out the window at the trees like she was waiting for something to come through them. Elias didn't push. He'd learned a long time ago that people talked when they were ready, and forcing it just made them close up tighter. On the third day, she asked if she could help with the furs. "You know how to scrape a pelt?" he asked. "No, but I can learn." He showed her how to stretch the skin on a frame, how to scrape away the fat and tissue without tearing the hide, how to rub in the mixture of brains and fat that would keep the leather soft. It was hard work, messy. Her hands cramped and her back ached, but she didn't complain. "You're stronger than you look," Elias said one afternoon, watching her work. "I'm tougher than people think," she replied. "Those the same thing?" "No, strong is what you're born with. Tough is what gets beaten into you." Elias didn't have an answer for that. By the end of the first week, the settlement started showing up. First it was Stillman, the mill owner, riding up the trail with an excuse about needing to discuss timber contracts. He stayed 10 minutes, spent 9 of them staring at Elena, and left looking disappointed that she hadn't sprouted horns. Then it was Mary Alcott, the preacher's wife, bringing a basket of preserves and questions dressed up as concern. "We just want to make sure you're settling in, dear," she said to Elena, her eyes cataloging every detail of the cabin. "I'm fine," Elena said. "And Mr. Crow is treating you well?" "He is. Because if you need anything, I don't." Mary left looking like she'd been denied a good piece of gossip. The worst was Thomas Farrell, who owned the trading post and thought that gave him authority over the entire settlement. He showed up on a Saturday with 2 men Elias didn't recognize, hard-looking types with revolvers on their hips. "Crow," Farrell said, not bothering to dismount. "We need to talk about your situation." Elias was splitting wood. He sank the axe into the stump and straightened. "What situation?" "The woman. People are concerned." "About what?" "About you bringing a stranger into the community without proper vetting, about the circumstances of her arrival, about things that aren't your concern," Elias said. Farrell's face darkened. "Everything that happens in Clearwater Ridge is my concern. I'm the one who keeps this place running, and I'm telling you, people don't like it. They don't like mysteries. They don't like women showing up with sacks on their heads and signs pinned to them. Then they shouldn't look." "Damn it, Crow, I'm trying to help you. If you'd just, I didn't ask for your help." "What?" One of the men with Farrell shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his gun. Elias saw it, didn't react, just stood there, axe within reach, face blank. Farrell saw it too. He held up a hand. "Easy, John. Mr. Crow and I are just talking." He looked back at Elias. "Look, I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm just saying people are worried. If you could just bring her down to the settlement, let folks meet her proper-like, it would go a long way toward easing concerns." "No." "Why not?" "Because she doesn't want to, and I don't blame her." "Crow, you're on my land, Farrell. You've said your piece. Now get off." Farrell's jaw worked. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the 2 men with him were watching Elias closely now, and neither of them looked eager to test him. "Fine," Farrell said, "but this isn't over." "Yeah, it is." They rode off. Elias watched them go, then pulled the axe from the stump and went back to splitting wood. The door to the cabin opened. Elena stepped out. They're going to cause trouble, she said. Probably. Because of me. Because they're small men with small lives and nothing better to do. She crossed her arms. I should leave. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere they can't find me. There's nowhere like that, not anymore. Elias set down the axe. Look, I meant what I said. You're safe here. And if they come back, I'll handle it. You can't fight the whole settlement. Don't need to. Just need to make it more trouble than it's worth. Elena looked at him for a long time. Then she went back inside. That night, over supper, she finally told him the rest. Clayton Voss wasn't just rich. He was connected. Denver society, banking, railroads. He had fingers in everything. When Elena had tried to leave, he hadn't just frozen her accounts. He'd spread the word that she was unstable, dangerous, that she'd stolen from him and couldn't be trusted. He made me into a ghost, she said. No one would hire me. No one would rent to me. My own friends stopped answering my letters. What about family? Dead. My father died 2 years into the marriage. My mother died when I was 12. I've got a sister in Philadelphia, but we haven't spoken in years. She didn't approve of Clayton. I should have listened. So you went to the agency. It was that, or... She stopped. It was the agency. Elias pushed his plate aside. This man, Clayton, you know where you are? I don't think so. The agency said they keep records confidential. People say a lot of things. Elena's hands tightened on her cup. You think he'll find me? I think men like that don't let go easy, and I think you should be ready in case he does. Ready how? Elias stood, walked to the corner, and pulled down a rifle from the rack above the door. It was a Winchester, well maintained, the wood dark with oil. You know how to shoot? He asked. No? Then you're going to learn. What? They started the next morning. Elias set up targets, old tin cans on a fallen log, and showed her how to hold the rifle, how to sight, how to breathe and squeeze instead of pull. She was terrible at first. Flinched every time the gun went off, jerked the barrel, missed by feet instead of inches. Stop thinking, Elias said. Just feel the weight. Let it settle. I am. No, you're fighting it. The gun's not your enemy. It's a tool. Treat it like one. She tried again. Missed again. Swore, a short, sharp word that made Elias raise an eyebrow. Didn't know you had that in you, he said. There's a lot you don't know. Fair enough. By the end of the week, she could hit the cans more often than not. By the end of the second week, she could do it without flinching. Better, Elias said one afternoon, watching her put 3 shots in a row through the same can. I hate it, Elena said, lowering the rifle. Hate what? That I have to learn this. That I have to be ready to... She stopped. I just want to live. I don't want to spend every day looking over my shoulder. Then don't. How? Elias took the rifle from her, checked the chamber, and set it against the porch rail. You stop running. You stop letting him live in your head. You decide right now that you're done being afraid. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Hard, but simple. Elena looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. I don't know how to do that, she said quietly. Yeah, you do. You've been doing it since you got here. You just haven't noticed. She didn't answer, just turned and walked back toward the cabin. That night, the first real snow came. Not the light dusting from the week before, but heavy, wet flakes that piled up fast and turned the world into something unrecognizable. By morning, the drifts were waist-deep and still coming. Elias had to dig a path to the woodshed. He came back inside, covered in snow, shaking it off like a dog. We're snowed in, he said. For how long? Could be days, could be a week. Depends on when it stops. Elena looked out the window. The settlement was invisible now, hidden behind a wall of white. Good, she said. Elias looked at her. Good? Nobody can get up here. Nobody can bother us. It's just us and the mountain. She said it like it was a relief, like being cut off from the world was the best thing that could happen. Elias didn't argue. Maybe she was right. They spent the next 3 days inside. Elias repaired traps, oiled his tools, and read from the 2 books he owned, a Bible he never opened and a copy of Robinson Crusoe with half the pages missing. Elena sewed. She'd found an old shirt of his with torn seams and set about fixing it without being asked. Then she moved on to patching a blanket, then reinforcing the straps on his pack. "You don't have to do that," Elias said. "I know." "Then why are you?" "Because it needs doing, and because I'm tired of being useless." "You're not useless." "I was. In Denver, I was decoration. Something pretty to hang on Clayton's arm at parties. Out here," she pulled a stitch tight. "Out here, at least I can be useful." "You're more than that." She looked up. "Am I?" "Yeah, you're Elias stopped. He wasn't good with words. Never had been. "Your company. Real company. Not just someone to fill space." Elena's hands stilled. She didn't look away. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I told you to stop thanking me." "I know, but I mean it." On the fourth day, the snow stopped. The sky cleared to a hard, brilliant blue, and the sun came out so bright it hurt to look at. Elias dug out the door and stood on the porch, breathing in air so cold it felt like glass in his lungs. Elena came out behind him, wrapped in a blanket. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's deadly. Beautiful things usually are." She laughed, a real laugh, short and surprised, like she'd forgotten how. "You're a grim bastard, Elias Crow." "Been told that before." They stood there in silence, watching the light shift through the trees. For the first time since she'd arrived, Elena looked at peace. Not happy, not yet, but not hunted either. It didn't last. That night, just after dark, Elias heard something outside. Not close, but not far either. Movement through the trees, heavy and deliberate. He stood, grabbed the rifle, and moved to the window. "What is it?" Elena whispered. "Don't know. Stay here." He stepped outside. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to cast shadows. The snow reflected the light, turning the clearing into something ghostly. There, at the edge of the trees, something big, low to the ground, a mountain lion. Female, from the size. She was 30 yards out, watching the cabin with eyes that reflected the moonlight like lamps. Elias raised the rifle but didn't fire, just stood there, waiting. The cat watched him. Didn't move, didn't charge, just stared. Then, after a long minute, she turned and melted back into the trees. Elias lowered the rifle, let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Behind him, the door opened. Elena stood there, her face pale. "Was that?" "Yeah." "Did you?" "No." She wasn't hunting, just curious. Elena looked at the trees where the cat had disappeared. "Will she come back?" "Maybe. Maybe not." "That's not comforting." "Wasn't meant to be." They went back inside. Elias bolted the door and set the rifle within reach. He didn't sleep much that night, just lay by the fire, listening to the silence outside and the sound of Elena breathing in the loft above. The cat didn't come back, but Elias knew she was out there, watching, waiting, just like everything else. But by the time December came, Elena had stopped jumping at shadows. She moved through the cabin like she belonged there, her shoulders less tight, her hands steadier. She still didn't smile much, but the dead flatness in her eyes was gone. Elias noticed, didn't comment. Just kept doing what he'd been doing, giving her space, giving her work, giving her reasons to stay. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, she asked him about his wife. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," she added quickly. "It's all right." Elias stared into the flames. "Her name was Margaret. We married young. Had a boy, Samuel. He was 4 when the fever came through." "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Doesn't bring them back." "No, it doesn't." They sat in silence for a while. "Do you still love her?" Elena asked. "Every day. But it's different now. Less like an open wound, more like..." He paused. "More like a scar." "Does it get easier?" "No. You just get used to carrying it." Elena nodded. She understood that. "I loved Clayton once," she said quietly. "Or I thought I did. Now I don't know if it was love or just hope. Hope that he'd be different than he was. That I could fix him. You can't fix people." "I know, but I tried anyway." We all do. Another silence, this one comfortable. Elias? Yeah? Thank you for not asking me to be something I'm not. Don't know what else you'd be. She smiled then. A real smile, small but real. It changed her face completely. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled. And for the first time in 6 years, Elias Crow didn't feel alone. Neither did Elena Voss. But the peace wouldn't last. It never did. Because 3 days before Christmas, a rider came up the trail with a message that would change everything. And the past Elena had been running from was about to catch up. The rider came up the trail just after noon on a Tuesday, his horse laboring through snow that hadn't melted in weeks. Elias saw him from the woodshed, a dark figure against white, moving slow but steady. He set down the axe and waited. The man was young, maybe 25, with a clean-shaven face that didn't belong in the mountains. He wore a wool coat too fine for frontier work and boots that had seen more boardwalks than trails. When he dismounted, he moved stiff, like he'd been riding for days. "You Elias Crow?" he asked. "Depends on who's asking." The man pulled an envelope from his coat. "I'm asking on behalf of the Territorial Marshal's office. Got a letter here for a Mrs. Elena Voss. Was told she might be staying with you." Elias didn't reach for the envelope. "Who told you that?" "The marriage broker agency in Denver. They keep records." "Thought those were confidential." "They are, unless there's legal cause to access them." The man held out the envelope again. "Look, I'm just a courier. I don't know what's in here. I was paid to deliver it, and I have. You take it or don't, that's your business. But my job's done either way." Elias took the envelope. It was sealed with red wax, official-looking, heavy paper, the kind that didn't bend easy. "She in some kind of trouble?" Elias asked. "Like I said, I'm just the courier." The man climbed back on his horse, wincing. "But if I were you, I'd make sure she reads that sooner rather than later. Mail doesn't come this far into the mountains for small things." He turned his horse and started back down the trail without waiting for a response. Elias watched him go, then looked down at the envelope. Elena's name was written across the front in precise black script. No return address, just the territorial seal stamped in the wax. He walked back to the cabin. Elena was inside, kneading bread dough at the table. She looked up when he entered, saw his face, and her hands went still. "What is it?" He held out the envelope. "Came for you." She wiped her hands on her apron, took it, and stared at the seal. All the color drained from her face. "It's from him," she said quietly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Her hand started shaking. "He's the only one who'd send something through official channels. He's the only one who could." She broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved across the page. Once, twice. Then she set it down on the table and sat heavily in the chair. Elias waited. "He's filed charges," she said, her voice flat. "Theft, embezzlement. Says I took $50,000 from his personal accounts and fled the state. There's a warrant. They want me to come to Denver to answer for it." "When?" 30 days. If I don't appear, they'll issue a fugitive warrant and send marshals." Elias picked up the letter and read it himself. The language was formal, legal, but the threat was clear. Elena was being accused of a crime serious enough to hang for if a judge decided to make an example. "This money," Elias said, "the money you took. Where is it?" "Gone. I used it to pay the agency to buy passage here to—" She stopped. "Most of it's gone. I've got maybe 500 left, hidden." "You have proof it was yours?" "My father's will. Bank records from before the marriage. But they're in a safe deposit box in St. Louis. I couldn't get to them when I left." "Why not?" "Because Clayton controlled everything. My access to the box required his signature. When I tried to get it, the bank manager told me Mr. Voss had left instructions that I was to be denied entry without his presence." "So you ran?" "What else was I supposed to do? Wait for him to have me arrested on false charges? He already had half of Denver convinced I was unstable. If I'd stayed—" Her voice cracked. "If I'd stayed, I'd be in an asylum, or worse." Elias set the letter down. His jaw was tight. "This warrant, it's real?" "I don't know. Maybe. Clayton has connections, judges, lawyers, politicians. If he wanted a warrant, he could get one. Whether it's legitimate or not doesn't matter. It exists. Then you don't go. Elena looked at him like he'd just suggested she sprout wings and fly. If I don't go, they'll come here. Let them. Elias, you don't understand. These aren't just local lawmen. This is the territorial marshal's office. They have authority across state lines. They'll drag me back in chains if they have to. Only if they can find you. They already found me. They found an address. Doesn't mean they'll find you. Elena stood, paced to the window, and stared out at the snow. Her shoulders were tight again, pulled up like she was bracing for a blow. I can't run anymore, she said quietly. I'm tired, Elias. I'm so damn tired of running. Then don't run. Fight. How? I don't have proof. I don't have money. I don't have anything except a past I can't escape, and a future that looks worse every day. Elias crossed the room and stood beside her. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she'd know she wasn't alone. You've got me, he said. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were wet but angry. What are you going to do? Shoot a federal marshal? If I have to. Elias, I mean it. You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. And I don't give up what's mine. I'm not yours. Aren't you? The question hung between them. Elena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't want you getting hurt because of me, she said finally. Too late. I made my choice the day I cut those ropes off your wrists. She looked away, out the window, at the endless white. What if they don't come alone, she asked. What if Clayton sends men with them? Hired guns? Then we deal with that too. You can't fight an army, Elias. Don't need to fight an army, just need to make it expensive enough that it's not worth it. Elena turned back to him, studied his face like she was seeing him for the first time. You really mean that? Every word. She laughed then, a short, bitter sound. You're insane. Probably, but I'm also right. She shook her head, but something in her posture had changed. The tightness was still there, but underneath it was something else, something harder. If we're going to do this, she said slowly, we need a plan, a real one. Not just you standing on the porch with a rifle. Agreed. And we need leverage. Something that makes Clayton think twice about pushing this. What kind of leverage? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she crossed to the table, picked up the letter again, and read it more carefully. He's calling it theft, she said. But it's not theft if I can prove the money was mine. The will, the bank records, they're still in St. Louis. If I could get to them, that's 1,000 miles from here. I know, but it's the only proof I have. Elias rubbed his jaw, thinking. How long would it take to get there and back? By train? 2 weeks? Maybe 3 if the weather's bad. You've got 30 days before the warrant deadline. I know. That's cutting it close. It's the only option I've got. Elias walked to the fireplace, stared into the flames. Margaret used to tell him he thought better when he was looking at fire. Said it quieted his mind. She'd been right about that, like she'd been right about most things. If you go, he said slowly, you'll be exposed, traveling alone, through cities where Clayton might have eyes. He could grab you before you ever make it to St. Louis. I know. So you don't go alone. Elena looked at him. You're not coming with me. Why not? Because someone needs to stay here. Keep the cabin secure. Make sure no one shows up looking for me while I'm gone. I don't like it. You don't have to like it, but it's the smart play. Elias turned to face her. And if something happens to you out there, if Clayton's men grab you before you can get the proof, then you'll know I tried. That's not good enough. It's all I've got, Elias. They stared at each other. The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Finally, Elias nodded. All right, but you don't leave until you're ready. We prepare first. Money, route, cover story. And you take the rifle. I don't need... Yes, you do. And you're going to practice every day until you can hit what you're aiming at without thinking about it. Elena's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You're bossy when you're worried. I'm practical when people I care about are being stupid. The words came out before he could stop them. Elena's expression shifted, softened. You care about me, she said. Not a question. Yeah, turns out I do. That's inconvenient. Tell me about it. This time she did smile. Small and sad, but real. Thank you, she said quietly. I told you to stop. I know, but I'm saying it anyway. That night, they sat up late making plans. Elena would take the train from Bannack, the nearest town with a rail station. It was a 2-day ride from Clearwater Ridge, hard travel in winter, but manageable. From there, she'd head east through Salt Lake, across to Cheyenne, then down to St. Louis. Round trip, 16 days if nothing went wrong. And if something does go wrong? Elias asked. Then I improvise. That's not a plan. It's the best I've got. Elias didn't argue. She was right. Sometimes the best plan was just moving forward and dealing with problems as they came. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Elias traded furs in the settlement for cash, enough to cover Elena's travel and lodging with some left over for emergencies. He also bought her a second-hand carpet bag and a wool traveling cloak that didn't look like it belonged to a woman running from the law. Try to blend in, he said, watching her pack. Don't draw attention. I know how to be invisible, Elias. I know you do, but you're not used to being alone anymore. People notice things when you're traveling solo. A woman alone attracts questions. So I'll say I'm a widow visiting family. Good. Keep it simple. Simple lies are harder to catch. Elena folded a spare dress into the bag. You sound like you've done this before. Done what? Run from something. Elias was quiet for a moment, then, everyone's running from something. I just learned to do it standing still. She looked at him, but didn't push. On the day before she was set to leave, they rode down to the settlement together. Elias needed to check on a supply order. Elena wanted to see the place one more time before she left. It had been weeks since she'd been around other people, and Elias watched her carefully as they moved through the small cluster of buildings that made up Clearwater Ridge. People stared, some nodded politely, others whispered behind hands. Mary Alcott saw them coming and crossed the street to avoid them entirely. They hate me, Elena said quietly. They don't know you. That's worse, isn't it? At least hate is based on something real. Elias tied the horses outside the trading post. Give them time. Fear makes people stupid. Eventually they get over it. And if they don't? Then they weren't worth knowing anyway. Inside, Thomas Farrell was behind the counter, weighing out nails for a customer. He looked up when they entered, his expression souring immediately. Crow. Mrs. Crow. He said her name like it tasted bad. We're not married, Elena said. Yet, Elias added. He hadn't planned to say it. The word just came out. Farrell's eyebrows went up. Elena's head snapped toward Elias. Yet? She repeated. Seemed like the logical next step, Elias said, his tone even. Unless you've got objections. Elena stared at him. Farrell stared at both of them. The other customer took his nails and left quickly. That's, Elena started, then stopped. That's not how proposals work. Wasn't a proposal, just an observation. An observation. Yeah. About marriage. Yeah. Elena's face was red. Elias couldn't tell if it was from anger or embarrassment or something else entirely. We'll talk about this later, she said through clenched teeth. Fair enough. Farrell cleared his throat. If you two are done with whatever that was, I've got your order in the back, Crow, and I'll need payment before I hand it over. Elias paid. Collected the box of supplies, coffee, flour, salt, ammunition. Elena stayed near the door, her arms crossed, pointedly not looking at him. On the ride back to the cabin, she finally spoke. What the hell was that? What? Don't play stupid. The marriage comment. Elias guided his horse around a fallen branch. Been thinking about it. Thinking about it? Yeah, you're staying. I'm staying. Makes sense to make it official. That's the most unromantic thing I've ever heard. Wasn't trying to be romantic. Was trying to be practical. Marriage isn't practical, Elias. It's supposed to mean something. It does mean something. Means you're protected. Means if Clayton comes looking, he can't claim you're his property anymore. You'd be mine. I'm not anyone's property. I know. Poor choice of words. He pulled his horse to a stop and turned to look at her. What I mean is, if we're married legally, you've got standing. You're not just some woman who ran off with money, you're a wife with rights. It makes the case harder for him. Elena stared at him. You've been thinking about this a lot. Some. And you think getting married would actually help? Can't hurt, she laughed. A real laugh this time, full of disbelief. You're proposing marriage as a legal strategy. Also because I don't want you to leave and not come back. That stopped her. The laughter died. Elias, I know you're planning to come back, he said quickly. I know that's the plan. But plans change. Things happen. And if something goes wrong out there, I want you to have a reason to fight your way back here. Even if that reason is just a stubborn bastard waiting in a cabin who asked you to marry him in a trading post in front of Thomas Farrell. Elena's eyes were bright. She looked away, blinking hard. That's still not romantic, she said, her voice thick. I know, but it's honest. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nudged her horse forward, moving past him on the trail. Ask me again when I get back, she said without turning around. If you still want to. I will. And Elias? Yeah? Ask me properly next time, not like you're negotiating a business deal. He smiled. I'll work on that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Warmer, less like two people tolerating each other, and more like two people figuring out how to fit together. That night, Elena left before dawn. Elias woke to find her already dressed, the carpet bag packed and waiting by the door. He'd offered to ride with her to Bannock, but she'd refused. It's better if I go alone, she said. Less suspicious. Just a widow traveling east. You've got the money? Yes. The rifle. Strapped to the saddle. And you remember the route? Elias. She put a hand on his arm. I've got it. Stop worrying. Can't help it. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Quick, light, gone before he could react. I'll be back, she said. I promise. You better be. She smiled, picked up the bag, and walked out into the pre-dawn cold. Elias stood in the doorway and watched her saddle the horse, watched her climb up, watched her ride down the trail until the trees swallowed her. Then he went back inside, closed the door, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. The days after Elena left were long. Elias kept himself busy, running trap lines, repairing equipment, cutting firewood for the rest of winter. But the cabin felt too quiet, too empty. He'd gotten used to her presence, the sound of her moving around, the smell of bread baking, the way she hummed sometimes when she thought he wasn't listening. Now there was just silence. On the fourth day, he rode down to the settlement to check for mail. There was nothing. Too soon. She wouldn't even be to St. Louis yet. On the seventh day, he went again. Still nothing. On the 10th day, a letter came. Her handwriting, small and precise. Made it to St. Louis. Bank was difficult, but I got access to the box. Have the documents. Heading back tomorrow. Should be in Bannock in 5 days. Will send word when I arrive. Elias read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. She was safe. She had the proof. She was coming back. He allowed himself to breathe. But on the 12th day, everything changed. He was in the settlement again, picking up supplies when a stranger rode in. Not the courier from before. This man was older, harder, with a face like weathered stone and a marshal's badge pinned to his coat. Behind him rode 2 others, both armed, both watching the street like they expected trouble. Elias knew what they were before they even dismounted. The marshal tied his horse and walked straight to Thomas Farrell, who pointed toward Elias without hesitation. You Elias Crow? The marshal asked. I am. I'm Marshal William Tate. I'm looking for a woman named Elena Voss. I have information she's been residing with you. Elias kept his face blank. What's she accused of? Theft? Embezzlement? $50,000 from a Mr. Clayton Voss of Denver. There's a warrant for her arrest. Tate pulled a folded paper from his coat. I'm authorized to take her into custody and transport her back to Colorado for trial. She's not here. Where is she? Don't know. Tate's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that? Don't care what you believe. I'm telling you she's not here. One of the other men stepped forward. He was younger, with a mean smile and a hand resting on his gun. Maybe we should search his place, he said. Make sure he's telling the truth. You've got no authority to search private property without cause, Elias said evenly. We've got a warrant, Tate replied. That's cause enough. Warrant's for Elena Voss, not me. You want to search my cabin, you'll need a separate warrant for that. Tate studied him. You a lawyer, Mr. Crow? No, but I know my rights. The marshal smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Fair enough, but here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make camp just outside this settlement and wait. And if Mrs. Voss shows her face anywhere within 100 miles, I'll know about it. You understand? I understand you're wasting your time. We'll see. Tate and his men turned and walked back to their horses. But before mounting, Tate looked back. One more thing, Mr. Crow. Harboring a fugitive is a crime. If I find out you've been helping her evade arrest, you'll be joining her in chains. Just something to think about. They rode off. Elias stood there, his jaw tight, his mind racing. Elena was on her way back. She'd be in Bannack in 3 days, maybe less. And there were federal marshals waiting. He had to warn her, had to get word to her before she walked into a trap. But how? Farrell was watching from the doorway of the trading post, his expression smug. Told you she was trouble, he called out. Elias ignored him, climbed on his horse and rode hard back to the cabin. He had 3 days, maybe less. He had to think. The answer came to him that night, staring into the fire. Elena was smart, careful. She wouldn't just ride straight into Clearwater Ridge without checking first. She'd send word from Bannack, wait for a response, make sure it was safe, which meant he needed to be in Bannack when she arrived. He packed light, food, water, ammunition, a blanket, left the cabin locked, and headed out before dawn. The ride to Bannack normally took 2 days, but he pushed hard, stopping only to rest the horse. He made it in a day and a half. Bannack was bigger than Clearwater Ridge, a real town with a hotel, a saloon, a telegraph office, and a rail station. Elias went straight to the station and asked when the next eastbound train was due. Came through this morning, the clerk said. Next one's not till tomorrow afternoon. What about westbound? Due in tonight, around 8. Elias checked into the hotel and waited. The train arrived late, just after 9. Elias stood on the platform, watching passengers disembark. Miners, merchants, families. No Elena. He was about to turn away when he saw her. She stepped off the last car, carpetbag in hand, her face pale but determined. She looked thinner than when she'd left, her eyes shadowed. Then she saw him. Her expression shifted, surprise, relief, fear all at once. Elias? What are you? There's marshals in Clearwater Ridge, he said quietly, stepping close. Federal. Looking for you. They've got a warrant. The color drained from her face. How long? 3 days ago. They're camped just outside the settlement, waiting. Did they search the cabin? No. But they will if they think you're there. Elena's hands tightened on the bag. I have the proof. The will, the bank records, everything. If I can just... You can't go back there. Not yet. Then what do I do? Elias looked around. The platform was emptying. They had minutes before someone noticed them. We find a lawyer, he said. Someone who can present the evidence without you having to walk into a trap. Someone who can negotiate. Where? Here. Bannack's big enough to have legal representation. We get someone to handle it, send the documents to Denver through official channels, force Clayton to respond. Elena shook her head. It won't work. Clayton owns half the lawyers in Denver. They'll bury it. Then we find one he doesn't own. She looked at him, really looked. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, but we do it fast. I've only got 18 days left on the warrant deadline. Then we start now. They found a lawyer the next morning. His name was Samuel Pritchard, a middle-aged man with ink-stained fingers and an office above the general store. He listened to Elena's story without interrupting, read through the documents she'd brought, and sat back in his chair. This is solid, he said finally. The will clearly states the inheritance was yours. The bank records show the money was deposited in your name before the marriage. Colorado's not a community property state, so technically your husband had no legal claim to it. So I'm not guilty, Elena said. Of theft? No. But that doesn't mean the warrant will just disappear. Whoever filed these charges has pull. They'll fight back. Then what do I do? Pritchard tapped his fingers on the desk. You don't go to Denver. You make them come to you. I'll draft a formal response to the warrant, include copies of all your evidence, and send it directly to the territorial court. I'll also file a countercomplaint against Mr. Voss for false accusation and unlawful restraint of assets. Put him on the defensive. How long will that take? Elias asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Depends on how fast the court moves. She's got 18 days. Pritchard grimaced. Then we'll have to work fast. They left the office with a plan. Pritchard would handle the legal filings. Elena and Elias would stay in Bannock and wait. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than walking into a marshal's trap. That night, in the hotel room they'd rented, separate beds because Elias was still a gentleman even when the world was falling apart, Elena finally let herself break. She sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that ran down her face while her shoulders shook. Elias didn't know what to do. He'd never been good with tears, so he just sat beside her and waited. When she finally stopped, she wiped her face with the back of her hand and laughed bitterly. I'm sorry, she said. I thought getting the proof would fix everything. I thought I'd finally be free. You will be. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. She looked at him. Why? Why do you believe in me when no one else does? Because I've seen what you're made of, Elias said simply. And I know you don't quit. Elena leaned against him, just rested her head on his shoulder and breathed. Ask me again, she said quietly. Ask you what? What you asked me before I left. Elias went still. Then, carefully, he shifted so he could see her face. Elena Voss, he said. Will you marry me? Why? Because I want you to. Because I don't want to spend another winter alone. Because you make bad coffee, and you're stubborn as hell, and you're the first person in 6 years who's made me want to try again. She smiled. It was small and tired, but real. That's better, she said. Still not great, but better. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Ask me again when this is over. I will. She closed her eyes. Good. They sat like that until the candle burned down and the room went dark. And outside, somewhere in the night, the marshals were still waiting. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough. Pritchard's office smelled like old paper and tobacco smoke. He'd been working for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, drafting and redrafting the response to the warrant. Elena sat across from him now, watching his pen move across the page with mechanical precision. This section here, Pritchard said, tapping the document. Your father's will. It's ironclad. No judge with half a brain would rule against it. And if the judge doesn't have half a brain, Elena asked, then we're in trouble. Pritchard didn't sugarcoat it. Elias liked that about him. But I've sent copies to 3 different courts, territorial, state, and federal. Someone will look at this properly. How long before we hear back? Could be days, could be weeks. He set down his pen and looked at her seriously. The problem isn't the evidence. The evidence is solid. The problem is time. If the marshals decide they're tired of waiting and come looking harder, all the legal paperwork in the world won't stop them from dragging you back to Denver. Elias was standing by the window, watching the street below. So we stay out of sight. For how long? Elena asked. We can't hide in Bannock forever. People talk. Someone's bound to recognize me from a description. Then we don't stay in Bannock, Elias said, turning from the window. We go somewhere the marshals won't think to look. Where? Back to the cabin. Elena stared at him. That's the first place they'll search. They already searched it, found nothing. Tate's smart enough not to waste time going back without new information. Elias walked to the desk. We go back quiet. No one sees us leave Bannock. No one knows we're there. We wait for Pritchard's filings to work their way through the system. And if they don't work fast enough, then we deal with that when it comes. Pritchard leaned back in his chair. It's risky, but he's not wrong. The marshals are looking for a woman traveling alone or with minimal protection. They're not expecting you to go back to the place they've already checked. Elena looked between them. This is insane. Most good plans are, Elias said. She laughed despite herself. It came out shaky. When do we leave? Tonight, after dark. They left Bannock just before midnight. The town was quiet, most windows dark, only the saloon still spilling light and noise into the street. Elias had purchased 2 horses earlier in the day from a rancher on the outskirts who didn't ask questions and didn't care about answers. They rode out the back way, avoiding the main road, following deer trails and creek beds that wouldn't show tracks come morning. Elena rode in silence, her carpet bag strapped behind her saddle, the rifle Elias had given her now holstered within easy reach. She'd gotten better with it, more comfortable, but her hands still shook when she thought too hard about why she might need to use it. "You all right?" Elias asked after an hour of riding. "No, but I'm still moving. That's all that matters." The journey back took 2 full days. They moved carefully, avoiding settlements, camping cold without fires that might give them away. On the second night, huddled under blankets in a shallow cave while sleet hammered down outside, Elena finally asked the question she'd been holding back. What happens if this doesn't work? If the courts don't move fast enough? If Clayton pushes harder? If the marshals come anyway? Elias was quiet for a long moment, listening to the ice rattle against stone. "Then we run," he said finally. "Canada's not that far. We could disappear up there, start over." "You'd do that? Leave everything behind?" "Already did it once when Margaret died. Didn't have anywhere else to go, so I stayed. But there's nothing tying me here except habit." He looked at her through the darkness. "And you're better than habit." Elena's throat tightened. "I don't want you to give up your life for me." "I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing a different one." "That's the same thing." "No, it's not. Giving up means you lose something. Choosing means you gain something else." She wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. So she just moved closer to him, sharing warmth, and tried not to think about all the ways this could end badly. They reached the cabin on the 3rd day. It looked exactly as they'd left it, door locked, windows shuttered, snow undisturbed except for animal tracks. Elias checked the perimeter carefully before letting Elena inside. "Looks clear," he said. "No one's been here." Elena stepped into the cabin and felt something in her chest loosen. It was strange. She'd only lived here for a few months, but it felt more like home than anywhere she'd been in years. "I missed this place," she said quietly. "It missed you too." She turned to look at him. Houses don't miss people. This one does. It's been too quiet. They settled back into routine, but everything felt different now, sharper, more temporary, like they were living on borrowed time and both knew it. Elena cooked. Elias tended the trap lines. They didn't talk about the warrant or the marshals or what would happen if Pritchard's legal strategy failed. They just existed, day by day, pretending normalcy was possible. On the 5th day back, Elias rode down to the settlement for supplies. He went alone, despite Elena's protests. "If someone sees both of us, they'll know you're back," he'd said. "This way, I'm just a trapper getting flour and coffee." "And if they ask about me?" "I'll tell them you're visiting family in Salt Lake. Keep it simple." He was gone 3 hours. When he came back, his face was grim. "What happened?" Elena asked immediately. "Marshals are still there and still asking questions." He dismounted and started unloading supplies. "Tate came into the trading post while I was there. Asked me point blank if I'd heard from you." "What did you say?" "Said I got a letter 2 weeks ago saying you'd decided to stay east, that the marriage arrangement wasn't going to work out. Did he believe you?" "Doesn't matter if he believed me. Matters that he can't prove otherwise." Elias carried the flour inside. "But he's not leaving. He said he's prepared to wait as long as it takes." Elena sank into a chair. "He knows. He knows I'm coming back." "Maybe. Or maybe he's just stubborn. Either way, we're trapped." Elias set down the supplies and knelt in front of her chair. "Listen to me. We're not trapped. We're waiting. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah. Trapped means no options. Waiting means we're choosing our moment." She looked at him, really looked. His face was weathered and hard, his eyes tired, but there was something solid in him, something that didn't break. "How are you so calm about this?" she asked. "Because panicking doesn't help, and because I've been in worse situations." "Like what?" "Like watching my wife and son die and not being able to do a damn thing about it." His voice was flat. This I can do something about, so I'm going to." Elena reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I know. He squeezed her hand once, then stood. We'll hear from Pritchard soon. Legal system's slow, but it's not that slow. Something will break. Something did break, but not the way they expected. 8 days after they'd returned to the cabin, a rider came up the trail. Not a marshal, not Pritchard, someone else entirely. Elias saw him coming and grabbed the rifle. Get inside, lock the door. Who is it? Don't know, but he's alone and he's riding hard. Elena moved to the window, peering through the shutters. The rider was young, maybe 30, dressed in traveling clothes that had seen better days. He pulled up short when he saw Elias standing on the porch with the Winchester pointed at his chest. Easy, the man said, raising his hands. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then state your business and move on. My name's Robert Chenoweth. I'm a reporter with the Rocky Mountain News out of Denver. I'm looking for Elena Voss. Elias didn't lower the rifle. Don't know anyone by that name? Really? Because I have it on good authority she's been living here with you for the past 3 months. Your authority is wrong. Chenoweth smiled. It wasn't friendly. Look, Mr. Crow, I'm not a marshal. I'm not law enforcement. I'm just a man trying to get a story. And the story I'm chasing is a lot bigger than a mail-order bride who may or may not have taken some money from her husband. What kind of story? The kind that involves Clayton Voss, $50,000 that wasn't really stolen, and a very powerful man using the legal system to hunt down his ex-wife because she knows things he doesn't want made public. Inside the cabin, Elena had gone very still. Elias studied the reporter. You got proof of that? Some. Enough to make me curious. Not enough to print anything yet. Chenoweth lowered his hand slowly. That's why I need to talk to Mrs. Voss, if she'll talk to me. And if she does, what then? Then I write the truth. And I print it where Clayton Voss can't bury it. Elias glanced toward the cabin. Elena was watching through the window, her face pale. She gave him a small nod. He lowered the rifle. Get down. Slow. Keep your hands where I can see them. Chenoweth dismounted carefully. Elias patted him down, no weapons, then gestured toward the cabin. Inside. Try anything stupid, and you won't make it back down the mountain. Understood. Elena was standing by the table when they entered. She'd put on a shawl and pulled her hair back, composing herself into something harder than she felt. Chenoweth stopped when he saw her. Mrs. Voss? That's not my name anymore, she said quietly. I had it legally changed after I left Denver. It's just Elena now. Fair enough. He pulled out a chair without being invited and sat. You mind if I ask you some questions? Depends on the questions. Did you steal $50,000 from Clayton Voss? No, I took money that belonged to me, money my father left me in his will. Can you prove that? Yes. I have the will, I have bank records, I have everything. Chenoweth pulled out a small notebook and pencil. Why didn't you present that evidence when he first accused you? Because he controlled everything. My access to banks, to lawyers, to the legal system. By the time I realized what he was doing, I was already being blacklisted across Denver. No one would help me. So you ran. I survived. Chenoweth wrote quickly. And now there's a federal warrant for your arrest, which is based on false charges. Have you contested it? Through a lawyer in Bannock. He's filed the evidence with 3 separate courts. And the marshals? Are camped in Clearwater Ridge waiting for me to show up. Chenoweth looked up from his notes. So why did you come back? Because I'm tired of running, and because if I don't face this, he wins. The reporter studied her for a long moment. You know Clayton Voss is one of the most powerful men in Colorado, right? Banking connections, political ties, friends in the territorial government. Going up against him publicly could destroy you. He already destroyed me once. I've got nothing left to lose. That's not quite true. Chenoweth glanced at Elias. Seems like you've built something here. Elena's jaw tightened. Which is exactly why I need this to end. I can't build a life while I'm looking over my shoulder. Chenoweth nodded slowly. All right. Here's what I'm thinking. You give me your full story, on the record, and I write it. Every detail. Your marriage, the abuse, the money, the false charges, all of it. I publish it in Denver where everyone can read it. Put public pressure on Clayton to drop this. He won't care about public pressure, Elena said. Maybe not. But his business partners will, his investors will, the people who depend on his reputation being spotless. Chenoweth leaned forward. Men like Clayton Voss live and die by appearance. You make him look bad enough, publicly enough, and he'll have to back off or risk losing everything. Elias crossed his arms. And if it doesn't work? If he doubles down? Then at least the truth is out there. At least people know what kind of man he really is. Elena looked at Elias. He gave her the smallest nod. Your choice. She turned back to Chenoweth. If I do this, you print everything, no editing to make it more palatable, no softening the details to protect reputations. That's the plan. And you publish it under my real name, Elena Voss. I want him to know it came from me. That'll make you a target. I'm already a target. Might as well make it count. Chenoweth smiled. For the first time, it looked genuine. I like you, Mrs. Voss. You've got spine. It's just Elena. And yeah, I know. They talked for 3 hours. Elena told him everything, the courtship, the marriage, the slow realization that Clayton wasn't the man he'd presented himself as, the control, the isolation, the way he'd turned her friends against her, cut her off from family, made her financially dependent on him. He never hit me, she said at one point. People always ask that. Like if there are no bruises, it doesn't count as abuse. But he didn't need to hit me. He had other ways of making me feel small. Chenoweth wrote it all down, every word, every detail. When she got to the part about the money, her voice steadied. My father died 6 months before I met Clayton. Left me everything, property, investments, cash, $120,000 total. When I married Clayton, I was assured my inheritance would remain separate, protected. She laughed bitterly. That lasted about a year. Then he started consolidating accounts, putting everything under his name for tax purposes. By the time I realized what he'd done, I couldn't access my own money without his signature. So you took it back. I took what I could, $50,000. It was in an account he'd overlooked. I withdrew it, closed the account, and left. Where's the money now? Gone. Used it to get here, to pay the marriage broker, to survive. I've got maybe a few hundred left. Chenoweth paused. You gave up $50,000 to escape? I gave up $50,000 to be free. There's a difference. He stared at her. Then he wrote that down word for word. When the interview was over, Chenoweth packed up his notes and stood. I'll have this written in 3 days, he said. Published in 5. Once it's out there, things are going to move fast. You ready for that? No, Elena said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. Good. He shook her hand, then he turned to Elias. You take care of her. She's going to need it. I plan to. Chenoweth left just before dark. They watched him ride down the trail until he disappeared into the trees. That was either the smartest thing we've ever done or the stupidest, Elena said. Probably both. She looked at him. You think it'll work? I think it's a chance, and chances are better than nothing. That night, they couldn't sleep. Elena sat by the fire, staring into the flames, while Elias checked and rechecked the rifle, the ammunition, the locks on the doors and windows. You're making me nervous, she said finally. Good. Nervous keeps you sharp. Elias, if this goes wrong, if Clayton sends men instead of lawyers, I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Already told you. My choice. I know. But I'm saying it anyway. She turned to look at him. You've given me more in 3 months than anyone gave me in 3 years of marriage. I don't want to be the reason you... Stop. Elias set down the rifle and crossed to her. You're not a burden. You're not a mistake. You're just a woman who got dealt a bad hand and is trying to play it the best you can. And I'm a man who's been alone too long and doesn't want to be alone anymore. That's it. Nothing complicated. Everything's complicated. Only if you let it be. He sat beside her. They stayed like that for a long time, listening to the fire crack and pop, not saying anything because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. 5 days later, the article hit Denver. They didn't know about it immediately. News traveled slow to the mountains, but on the 6th day, Pritchard sent a telegram to the trading post in Clearwater Ridge, and Thomas Farrell, motivated by either decency or curiosity, rode up to deliver it himself. Elias read it twice. Article published. Response immediate. Voss denying everything, courts reviewing evidence. Marshal Tate recalled to Denver for questioning, advised staying put, will update soon. Pritchard. He handed the telegram to Elena. She read it, then read it again. It's working, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe. Elias. They recalled the marshal. That means someone's paying attention. Or it means Clayton's covering his tracks. Elena looked at him sharply. Why can't you just let me have this? One moment of hope? Because hope gets people killed when they stop being careful. She stood up fast, the telegram crumpling in her fist. I am being careful. I've been careful my whole life. Careful with Clayton, careful with the agency, careful coming here. And you know what it's gotten me? Nothing but more running and more fear. So forgive me if I want to believe, just for one damn minute, that maybe this is actually going to work. Elias stood too. I want to believe that, but wanting it doesn't make it true. Then what do you suggest? We keep hiding forever? If that's what it takes. That's not a life, Elias. That's just surviving. Surviving's what you do until you can do better. Elena stared at him. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. I can't live like this. I can't keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then what do you want to do? I want to go to Denver. Elias went very still. What? You heard me. I want to go to Denver. Face Clayton. Face the courts. End this. That's insane. Probably. But it's the only way this stops. Pritchard can file papers all day long, but until I show up and make them look me in the eye and listen to me, nothing changes. They'll arrest you the second you step off the train. Maybe. But they'll also have to give me a trial. And at a trial, I get to present evidence. I get to tell my side. I get to make Clayton answer for what he did. Elias shook his head. You're not thinking straight. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in months. Elena crossed to him. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. If I'm going down, I'm going down fighting. You're not going down at all if you stay here. And what kind of life is that? Looking over my shoulder every day? Waiting for marshals or hired guns or whoever else Clayton sends? I won't live like that. I can't. Elias grabbed her shoulders. Not hard, but firm enough to make her focus. Listen to me. You go to Denver, you're walking into a trap. Clayton's got money, power, connections. You've got a lawyer in Bannock and a newspaper article. That's not enough. It's all I've got. Then we get more. We wait for the courts to move. We let Pritchard do his job. We don't hand Clayton what he wants on a silver platter. Elena pulled away. I'm going, with you or without you. Damn it, Elena. I mean it. I'm getting on a train to Denver, and I'm ending this. You can come with me, or you can stay here. But I'm done running. They stared at each other. The silence stretched out, heavy and tense. Finally, Elias let out a long breath. You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met. I know. This is a bad idea. I know that too. And you're doing it anyway. Yes? He rubbed his face with both hands. Fine. But we do it smart. We get Pritchard involved. We make sure there's a plan for if things go sideways. And we bring the rifle. Elena almost smiled. Deal. And one more thing. What? Elias pulled her close, kissed her, hard and fast and full of every word he didn't know how to say. When he pulled back, she was staring at him with wide eyes. What was that for? She asked. For luck. And because if we're about to do something this stupid, I wanted to do it first. This time she did smile. Still not romantic. I'm working on it. They packed that night. Not much. Clothes, documents, money, the rifle broken down and wrapped in canvas. They'd leave before dawn, ride to Bannock, catch the first train east. As Elena folded her spare dress into the carpet bag, she found herself thinking about the woman who'd arrived here 3 months ago. Hooded, broken, labeled unfit. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd learned to shoot, to fight, to stand her ground, someone who was done being anyone's victim. She looked at Elias, who was checking the rifle one last time, his face set in that expression she'd come to know meant he was worried but wouldn't say it. Thank you, she said quietly. He looked up. For what? For seeing me. The real me. Not what Clayton made me into. Not what the agency labeled me as. Just me. Elias set down the rifle and crossed to her, took her face in his hands. "That's all I've ever seen," he said. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Elena believed him. Outside, the wind was rising. A storm was coming in from the north, the kind that could bury the valley in snow and ice. But by morning, they'd be gone, riding toward Denver, toward Clayton, toward whatever ending waited for them there. They left before the sun came up, the cabin door locked behind them, and the key buried under a stone near the woodshed. The trail down to Bannock was frozen solid, the horse's breath coming out in white clouds that hung in the air like ghosts. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in the dark hours before dawn when sleep wouldn't come, and the weight of what they were about to do pressed down like a physical thing. The train station in Bannock was crowded despite the early hour. Miners heading to Silverbow, merchants traveling to Salt Lake, families packed tight with children and luggage. Elias bought 2 tickets to Denver under false names, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Chenoweth, a small nod to the reporter who'd started this whole thing. The clerk barely looked at them. They found seats in the back of the third car, away from windows, away from crowds. Elena kept her face turned toward the wall, her carpet bag clutched in her lap. The rifle was stored above them, wrapped and tied, looking like nothing more than a prospector's tools. The train lurched forward with a hiss of steam and a metallic screech. Elias watched Elena's shoulders tense. "You can still change your mind," he said quietly. "No, I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I do, I'll never stop running, and I'm tired of running." The train picked up speed, the landscape outside blurring into white and gray and the dark shapes of trees. Elias settled back in his seat and tried to make himself comfortable. It would be 3 days to Denver, 3 days to come up with a plan better than walking into the territorial courthouse and hoping for the best. They changed trains in Cheyenne. The platform was chaos, vendors shouting, passengers pushing, porters hauling trunks and cases. Elias kept one hand on Elena's elbow and the other on the rifle case, steering them through the crowd toward the Denver line. That's when he saw them, 2 men, standing near the ticket office, both watching the crowd with the kind of attention that wasn't casual. One was tall and lean with a scar across his jaw. The other was shorter, wider, with hands that looked like they'd broken things before. Hired men. Had to be. Elias didn't slow down, didn't change direction, just kept moving, kept Elena close, and prayed they hadn't been recognized. They almost made it. "Excuse me, miss." The tall one stepped into their path. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You look familiar. Have we met?" Elena kept her face down. "No, you're mistaken." "I don't think I am." He looked at Elias. "This your husband?" "Yes," Elias said flatly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a train to catch." "Funny thing," the shorter man moved to block their other side. "We're looking for someone, woman about your height, your build, goes by the name Elena Voss. You wouldn't happen to know her, would you?" "Never heard of her." "That's strange, because we were told she'd be coming through here, and you two matched the description we were given pretty closely." Elias's hand tightened on the rifle case. The platform was crowded enough that a fight would draw attention, might even draw the law. But if these men were working for Clayton, they wouldn't care about making a scene. "We're just travelers passing through," Elias said. "Got no quarrel with you and no interest in your business." The tall man's smile widened. "See, that's where you're wrong. Because if you're who I think you are, then you are our business." Elena's hand slipped into her coat pocket. Elias knew without looking that she'd grabbed the small revolver he'd given her before they left. A backup, just in case. "Let us pass," Elias said quietly. "Can't do that." "Then you've got a problem." The shorter man's hand moved toward his belt. Elias saw it, dropped the rifle case, and moved. He was fast for his size. His fist caught the shorter man square in the throat, dropping him choking to the platform. The tall one went for his gun, but Elena was faster. She pulled the revolver and pointed it straight at his chest. "Don't," she said. The tall man froze. His eyes flicked from Elena to Elias to the crowd around them. People were starting to notice, starting to back away. "You shoot me here, you'll hang," he said. "Maybe. But you'll still be dead." A whistle blew. The Denver train was boarding. "We're leaving," Elias said. "You're going to let us, and if you follow us, I'll put you down like the dogs you are." He picked up the rifle case. Elena kept the revolver trained on the tall man as they backed toward the train. The shorter one was still on the ground, gasping. They climbed aboard. The train started moving. Through the window, Elias saw the tall man helping his partner to his feet, saw him pointing at the train, saw him running toward the ticket office. "They'll wire ahead," Elena said, her voice shaking. "They'll have people waiting in Denver." "I know. So what do we do?" Elias looked at her, at the gun still gripped in her white-knuckled hand, at the fear in her eyes that she was trying so hard to hide. "We get off before Denver," he said. "Find another way in." They jumped off the train at a water stop 20 miles outside the city. It was barely a station, just a wooden platform and a water tower surrounded by empty prairie. The sun was setting, turning the sky the color of a healing bruise. "Now what?" Elena asked. "We walk." 20 miles? Unless you've got a better idea. She didn't. They walked through the night. Elias set a hard pace, stopping only when Elena needed to rest. The cold bit through their coats but kept them sharp, alert. By the time the sun came up, they could see Denver in the distance, a sprawl of buildings and smoke against the mountains. They came in from the south, avoiding the main roads, sticking to alleys and side streets. Elias had been to Denver twice before, years ago, when Margaret was still alive. The city had grown since then. More buildings, more people, more places to hide, and more places for Clayton's men to be watching. They found a boarding house on the edge of town. The landlady was old and half-blind and didn't ask questions when Elias paid cash for a room. They climbed the narrow stairs and locked the door behind them. Elena collapsed onto the bed. "We made it. We made it here. That's not the same as making it through." She closed her eyes. "You're such an optimist. Someone has to be realistic. That's not what realistic means." Despite everything, Elias smiled. She was still fighting, still had spark. That was good. They'd need it. He pulled out the documents Elena had brought from St. Louis and spread them on the small table by the window. The will, the bank records, the marriage certificate, everything that proved her case. "We need to get these to the courthouse," he said. "File them officially. Make sure there's a record before Clayton can bury it." "How? We can't just walk in there. His people will be watching." "Then we don't walk in. We send them." "Send them how?" Elias thought for a moment. "The reporter, Chenoweth. He's here in Denver. We get the documents to him. He delivers them to the courthouse as part of his story. Gives us cover." Elena sat up. "You think he'll do it?" "He came all the way to the mountains to find you. I think he's invested enough to help." They found Chenoweth at the Rocky Mountain News office on Larimer Street. He was at his desk, surrounded by paper and coffee cups, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened. When he saw them, his eyes went wide. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said, standing quickly. "Do you have any idea how many people are looking for you?" "We have an idea," Elias said. "That's why we need your help." Chenoweth looked around the office. 2 other reporters were working nearby, both pretending not to listen. He grabbed his coat. "Not here, follow me." He led them to a saloon 3 blocks away, empty except for an old man sleeping at the bar. They took a table in the back corner. "Clayton's gone insane," Chenoweth said without preamble. "After my article ran, he put out a reward, $500 for information leading to your arrest. He's got men at every train station, every hotel, every boarding house. The marshals might have been recalled, but his private army hasn't." "We know," Elena said. "We ran into 2 of them in Cheyenne." "And you still came here? Are you trying to get killed?" "I'm trying to end this." Elena pulled the documents from her bag and set them on the table. "I need these filed with the territorial court, today. But I can't do it myself." Chenoweth picked up the will and read it. His eyebrows went up. "This is ironclad." "I know. And you've got bank records to back it up? Every transaction, every deposit, everything." The reporter looked at Elias. "You know, if I file this, Clayton's going to know she's here. He'll come after her with everything he's got." "Let him," Elias said. "We're not hiding anymore." Chenoweth laughed, short and sharp. "You're both crazy." "Probably, but we're also right." The reporter stared at the documents for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll file them. But you 2 need to disappear until the hearing. I've got a friend who owns a warehouse on the river. You can hole up there. It's not comfortable, but it's safe." When's the hearing? Elena asked. If I file today? 3 days? Maybe 4? The court's backlogged, but with the publicity around this case, they'll move it up. And what happens at the hearing? You present your evidence, Clayton presents his, judge makes a ruling. That's simple? That's simple. But Elena? Chenoweth's expression was serious. Clayton's going to have lawyers, good ones, and they're going to try to tear you apart on the stand, make you look unstable, vengeful, greedy. You ready for that? I've been ready for 3 years. Chenoweth nodded. Then let's end this. The warehouse was exactly as advertised, cold, drafty, and smelling of river water and old wood, but it had 4 walls and a roof and a door that locked from the inside. Elias checked every corner, every window, every possible entry point. Then he set up a watch rotation. I'll take first shift, he said. You sleep. I can't sleep. Try anyway. Elena lay down on the pile of blankets Chenoweth had brought, stared at the ceiling. Listened to Elias moving around in the darkness, checking and rechecking things that had already been checked. Elias? Yeah. What happens if we lose? He was quiet for a moment. We don't lose. But what if we do? Then we run, like I said before. Canada, Mexico, wherever, but we don't stop fighting. I'm scared. I know. Are you? He came and sat beside her, took her hand in the darkness. Terrified. She laughed despite herself. You don't seem like it. That's because being scared doesn't help. Acting in spite of it does. Elena squeezed his hand. When this is over, if we make it through, ask me again. Ask you what? You know what. He did, and this time he didn't make a joke about it, just held her hand and kept watch while she finally, fitfully, slept. The 3 days passed like 3 years. They stayed in the warehouse, venturing out only when absolutely necessary. Chenoweth brought food and news. The hearing was set for Monday morning. The courthouse was already packed with reporters and curious onlookers. Clayton had hired 3 lawyers. The judge was Samuel Hartford, known for being fair but hard. He doesn't suffer fools, Chenoweth said, and he doesn't like his time wasted. You get 1 shot at this. Make it count. On Sunday night, Elena couldn't sit still. She paced the warehouse, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. What if I freeze up there, she said. What if I can't find the words? Then you tell the truth, Elias said. That's all you need. The truth didn't help me before. Because before nobody was listening, now they are. She stopped pacing and looked at him. How are you so sure this is going to work? I'm not, but I'm sure you're strong enough to handle it either way. Monday morning came cold and clear. They dressed carefully, Elena in the one good dress she'd brought, Elias in his cleanest shirt and the coat he'd worn to Margaret's funeral. They looked like what they were, frontier people out of place in the city, but trying. Chenoweth met them outside the courthouse at dawn, before the crowds arrived. You ready? He asked Elena. No, but I'm going anyway. Good answer. The courtroom was smaller than Elena had imagined. Wood-paneled walls, high windows, rows of benches already filling with spectators. At the front, behind a raised desk, Judge Hartford sat reviewing papers. He was older, maybe 60, with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. Clayton was already there. He sat at the plaintiff's table with his 3 lawyers, all of them in expensive suits. He looked exactly as Elena remembered, tall, handsome, perfectly groomed. But when he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, then anger, then something colder. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes, to not look away. You don't own me anymore, she thought. You never really did. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Hartford looked up. This is case number 847, Voss versus Voss, charges of theft and embezzlement. Mrs. Voss, you're representing yourself? Elena stood. Yes, Your Honor. Against 3 attorneys, that's inadvisable. It's all I can afford. Hartford's mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Very well, Mr. Voss, your complaint alleges that the defendant stole $50,000 from your personal accounts. Is that correct? Clayton's lead attorney stood. His name was Whitmore, and he looked like he'd been born in a courtroom. That's correct, Your Honor. We have bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals from Mr. Voss's accounts. made by the defendant shortly before she fled Denver. Mrs. Voss, how do you respond? Elena's hands were shaking, but her voice came out steady. The money wasn't his. It was mine. Left to me by my father in his will. I have the documents to prove it. Hartford held out his hand. Let's see them. Elena brought the will, the bank records, everything, laid them on the judge's desk. Hartford read through them slowly, his expression unchanging. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Whitmore, these documents appear to show that the funds in question were indeed Mrs. Voss's inheritance. Do you have evidence to the contrary? Whitmore's confidence flickered. Your Honor, the issue isn't the origin of the funds, but rather the manner in which they were removed. Mrs. Voss withdrew the money without her husband's knowledge or consent. Because he'd locked me out of my own accounts, Elena interrupted. Mrs. Voss, please wait your turn, Hartford said, but his tone wasn't harsh. Whitmore continued, Your Honor, in Colorado, marital property laws state that I'm aware of Colorado marital property laws, Counselor, and I'm also aware that inheritances are generally considered separate property unless commingled. Were these funds commingled with marital assets? Whitmore hesitated. To some degree, yes. Mr. Voss had consolidated accounts for tax purposes. Without my consent, Elena said again. Hartford looked at her. Mrs. Voss, did you agree to this consolidation? No, Your Honor. I was told it was necessary, that it was standard practice. I didn't know I could refuse. And when you discovered what had been done? I tried to access my money. The bank said I needed my husband's signature. When I went to get it, he refused. Said the money was ours now, not mine. That's when I knew I had to leave. So you withdrew what you could and left? Yes. Hartford looked at Clayton. Mr. Voss, did you refuse your wife access to her inherited funds? Clayton stood. He looked calm, reasonable. Everything Elena knew he wasn't. Your Honor, my wife was not well. She was under significant emotional strain. I was trying to protect her and our assets from rash decisions. That's a lie, Elena said. Mrs. Voss, he isolated me, controlled me, made it impossible for me to have any independence. The money was just another way to keep me trapped. That's absurd, Clayton said smoothly. I gave her everything. A beautiful home, social standing, security, a cage. Elena said, her voice rising. You gave me a cage. The courtroom went silent. Hartford leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Voss, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence of this alleged control and abuse? Elena's heart sank. Not the kind you can hold in your hand, but I can testify to it. I can tell you what it was like. A testimony alone, without corroboration. I can corroborate it. The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. A woman stood, young, maybe 30, well-dressed. Elena didn't recognize her at first. Then she did. Margaret Sinclair, one of Clayton's business partner's wives, someone Elena had thought was a friend once. I'd like to testify, Margaret said. Hartford raised an eyebrow. And you are? Margaret Sinclair. I knew both Mr. and Mrs. Voss socially in Denver. Approach the bench. Margaret walked forward. She didn't look at Clayton, but Elena saw his face go rigid. Hartford swore her in. What is it you wish to say, Mrs. Sinclair? I witnessed Mr. Voss's treatment of his wife on multiple occasions. At social gatherings, private dinners, charity events. She paused. He was controlling, dismissive. He would contradict her in public, speak over her, isolate her from conversations. Once at a dinner party, I saw him grip her arm so tightly it left bruises. When I asked Elena about it later, she said she'd bumped into a door. That's absurd, Clayton said. This woman is— I'm not finished, Margaret said sharply. She turned to the judge. I also know for a fact that Mr. Voss controlled Elena's finances completely. She told me once that she couldn't even buy a dress without his approval, that he reviewed every purchase she made and questioned her about it. Mrs. Sinclair, why didn't you come forward with this information earlier? Hartford asked. Because I was afraid. My husband does business with Mr. Voss. I didn't want to jeopardize that. But then I read Mr. Chenoweth's article, and I realized— Her voice cracked. I realized I'd been complicit in Elena's suffering by staying silent. I couldn't live with that anymore. Clayton was on his feet. This is hearsay, lies from a woman with an agenda. Mr. Voss, sit down, Hartford said quietly. The steel in his voice was unmistakable. Clayton sat. Hartford looked at Elena. Mrs. Voss, is Mrs. Sinclair's testimony accurate? Yes, Your Honor. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Whitmore. Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence. I've heard testimony from both parties and a witness. Here's what I see. A woman with documented inheritance rights who withdrew her own money from accounts that should never have been consolidated without her explicit consent in the first place. That's not theft. That's recovery of personal property. Your Honor, the warrant was issued based on incomplete information and I suspect undue influence. I'm dismissing all charges against Mrs. Voss effective immediately. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for the doors. Clayton's face went purple. Your Honor, this is outrageous. What's outrageous, Mr. Voss, is using the legal system to harass your estranged wife. Hartford's voice was cold. I'm also ordering that any remaining funds from Mrs. Voss's inheritance that are still held in consolidated accounts be released to her immediately. You have 10 days to comply. I'll appeal. You're welcome to try, but I'd advise against it. This case has already generated enough negative attention for you. I doubt you want more. Hartford banged his gavel. Court dismissed. Elena stood there, not quite believing it. The charges were gone. She was free. Elias was beside her immediately, his hand on her shoulder. You did it. We did it, she corrected. Chenoweth appeared, grinning. Hell of a show. I'm going to write the best follow-up piece Denver's ever seen. Clayton was leaving, his lawyers surrounding him, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. As he passed Elena, he stopped. This isn't over, he said quietly. Elena looked him in the eye. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. He stared at her. Then, without another word, he walked out. Outside the courthouse, the sun was bright, too bright. Elena had to squint against it. What now? She asked. Elias looked down at her. Now we go home. To the cabin? Unless you've got somewhere better in mind. She thought about it, about Denver, about St. Louis, about all the places she'd been and the people she'd tried to be. No, she said. The cabin's good. They left Denver that afternoon. Didn't wait for the money Hartford had ordered released. Didn't wait to see if Clayton would try something desperate. Just bought tickets north and rode out of the city without looking back. On the train, Elena rested her head against Elias's shoulder. Ask me, she said quietly. Ask you what? You know what? Elias smiled, turned to look at her. Elena Voss, will you marry me? Why? Because I love you. Because you're the stubbornest, bravest, most impossible woman I've ever met. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep beside you every night. Because you make bad coffee and you snore and you still can't shoot worth a damn, and I don't care about any of it. Elena was crying, smiling and crying at the same time. That's the best proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes? Yes. It's a yes. He kissed her. Right there on the train in front of everyone, not caring who saw. When they finally pulled apart, she was laughing. What? Elias asked. Nothing, just we're getting married. We are. In a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Probably. And I'm going to be Mrs. Crow. If you want to be. She thought about it. About the name she'd carried for 3 years that had felt like chains. About the freedom to choose something new. Yeah, she said. I want to be. The mountains came into view as the sun set, dark shapes against a darker sky. Home. For both of them now. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Elena wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. They were married on a Thursday in late March when the snow had finally started to melt, and the creek behind the cabin ran loud with runoff. There was no preacher. Elias didn't trust most of them anyway, and Elena had no use for ceremony that felt hollow. Instead, they rode down to Clearwater Ridge and found Judge Macklin, a circuit judge who happened to be passing through on his way to Butte. He married them in the back room of the trading post for $5 and a bottle of whiskey Elias had been saving. The only witnesses were Thomas Farrell, who'd softened considerably since Elena's name had been cleared in the Denver papers, and Mary Alcott, who cried through the whole thing despite having avoided Elena for months. "Do you, Elias Crow, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Elena Voss, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" Elena looked at Elias, at the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard, the hands that had held her when she couldn't hold herself. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. You can kiss her if you want." Elias did, brief and awkward and perfect. Afterward, Farrell shook Elias's hand. "Never thought I'd see the day you'd marry again, Crow." "Neither did I." "She's good for you. You look less like you want to shoot everyone." "Don't push it," Farrell laughed. Mary Alcott hugged Elena, whispered something about being sorry for judging her, and pressed a jar of preserves into her hands like it could make up for months of cold shoulders. They rode back to the cabin as husband and wife. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. Elena kept looking at the thin gold band Elias had bought from the jeweler in Bannock. It was simple, unadorned, and she loved it more than any of the expensive jewelry Clayton had ever given her. "You're staring at it," Elias said. "I know, I never thought I'd want to wear one of these again." "You don't have to if you don't want to." "I want to." She looked at him. "It means something different this time." "What does it mean?" "That I chose it. That I chose you." He reached over and squeezed her hand. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. The cabin felt different when they walked through the door that night. Warmer somehow, even though the fire hadn't been lit yet, like the space itself knew something had changed. Elena set down her bag and looked around, at the table where they'd eaten 100 meals, at the loft where she'd spent so many sleepless nights, at the door that had been a barrier between her and the world and was now just a door. "What are you thinking?" Elias asked, building up the fire. "That I'm home," she said simply. "Really home. For the first time since I was a child." He stood and crossed to her, pulled her close. "Good, because I'm not letting you leave." "Don't want to." They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other while the fire caught and the cabin filled with warmth. That night, for the first time, Elena didn't sleep in the loft. She slept beside Elias in the bed he'd built with his own hands, wrapped in quilts that smelled like pine and wood smoke. And when she woke in the middle of the night from a dream she couldn't quite remember, he was there, solid, real, hers. The money from Hartford's order came 6 weeks later. A bank draft for $73,000. The original $50,000 Elena had withdrawn, plus the remaining inheritance that Clayton had been forced to release, plus interest. It arrived by courier with a letter from Pritchard explaining that Clayton had contested the order 3 times and lost each time. The final ruling had been scathing, with Hartford suggesting that if Clayton brought one more frivolous motion to his court, he'd be held in contempt. Elena stared at the draft for a long time. "That's more money than I've ever seen in my life," Elias said quietly. "It's more than I thought I'd ever see again." She folded the draft carefully and put it in the tin box where they kept important papers. "What should we do with it?" "It's your money, your choice." "It's our money now, so it's our choice." Elias thought about it. "The cabin could use work. Bigger windows, maybe an addition, real furniture instead of what I cobbled together." "That doesn't even make a dent in this." "Then we save it. For emergencies. For—" He stopped. "For what?" "For whatever comes next." Elena smiled. "You're thinking about children." "Maybe. Are you?" "I don't know. Maybe. Someday." She looked at him. "Would you want that?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I had a son once. Watching him die nearly killed me. I don't know if I could go through that again." "You wouldn't have to. Not like that." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'd be there with you, whatever happens." He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "Let's just get through one season at a time. See where we are come winter." "Deal." But as spring turned to summer, Elena found herself thinking about it more, about what it would be like to have a child in this place, to raise someone in the mountains, away from the suffocating expectations of city life, to teach them to be strong without being hard, to be kind without being weak. She didn't say any of this to Elias. Not yet. But she thought about it. By June, word had spread through the territory about what had happened in Denver, about Elena standing up to Clayton Voss and winning, about the court's ruling and Hartford's scathing rebukes. Chenoweth's follow-up article had been picked up by papers as far east as Chicago and as far west as San Francisco. Suddenly, Elena Crow was something she'd never expected to be, famous. People started showing up at the cabin. Not many, but enough to be noticeable. Women mostly, traveling from settlements all over Montana and Wyoming. They came with questions, with stories, with hope. The first was a woman named Sarah Denton. She arrived on horseback in the middle of July, her face sunburned and her hands calloused from work. "I read about you," she said when Elena answered the door. "About what you did." And I need to know how you did it, how you got away from him." Elena invited her in, made coffee, listened. Sarah's husband wasn't physically violent, she said, but he controlled everything, her money, her friendships, her movements. She felt like she was suffocating. "Do you have proof?" Elena asked. "Bank records, letters, anything that shows the control?" "Some, not much." "Then start collecting it. Document everything. Every time he denies you access to your own money, write it down. Every time he isolates you from friends or family, keep a record, build a case. And then what? Then you find a lawyer who'll listen, someone who cares more about the law than about keeping powerful men comfortable. It won't be easy, but it's possible." Sarah left with a list of lawyers Pritchard had recommended and a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there when she arrived. 3 weeks later, another woman came, then another, then two at once. Elena started keeping a notebook. Names, situations, advice given. She wrote letters to lawyers on behalf of women who couldn't afford them. She connected women with safe places to stay, with people who could help. "You're building something," Elias said one evening, watching her work by lamplight. "I'm just helping people." "That's building something." She looked up at him. "Does it bother you? All these people coming here?" "No. I like seeing you like this." "Like what?" "Like you've got purpose." Elena smiled. "I always had purpose. I was just too busy surviving to see it." By autumn, the trickle of visitors had become a steady stream. Elena couldn't help them all, but she helped who she could. And word spread. The woman in the mountains who'd beaten Clayton Voss, the one who'd stood up in court and won, the one who'd teach you how to do the same. Clearwater Ridge started changing too. Not overnight, but gradually. Women who'd been quiet started speaking up. Men who'd been careless started being more careful. The settlement wasn't perfect, nowhere was, but it was better. And Elena had done that, just by refusing to stay quiet. In October, a letter came from Denver, from Margaret Sinclair, the woman who'd testified at the hearing. "Dear Elena, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to thank you for your courage in court. Watching you stand up to Clayton gave me the strength to do something I should have done years ago. I left my husband. It wasn't easy. He threatened to ruin me socially, to freeze my accounts, to make sure I never saw a penny of the money I'd brought into the marriage. But I remembered what you said in court, about cages, about choosing freedom over security. I hired a lawyer. I documented everything, and 2 weeks ago, I won. Not just my freedom, but my inheritance and half of our marital assets. The judge cited your case as precedent. I'm writing to tell you that what you did in Denver didn't just save you, it saved me. And I know from talking to other women that I'm not alone. You changed things, Elena. You changed everything. With deepest gratitude, Margaret Sinclair." Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she showed it to Elias. "You should be proud," he said. "I am, but I'm also scared." "Of what?" "That I can't live up to what they think I am. These women, they see me as some kind of hero. But I'm not. I'm just someone who got lucky. You weren't lucky. You were brave. There's a difference. I don't feel brave. Brave people never do. That's the point." Winter came hard and early that year. By November, the passes were blocked and the settlement was cut off from the outside world. But the cabin was warm, the larder was full, and for the first time in 6 years, Elias wasn't alone when the snow fell. They spent the long, dark evenings by the fire. Elena would read aloud from books Elias had never bothered to open, and he'd whittle small figures from pine scraps: bears, wolves, birds. She kept them lined up on the windowsill like a tiny wooden forest. "You're good at that," she said one night, watching him work. "It's just whittling. It's art. It's something to do with my hands," she smiled. "You're allowed to be good at things, you know. You don't have to pretend everything you do is just practical. Old habit. Break it." He looked at her. At the way the firelight caught in her hair, at the easy way she sat with her feet tucked under her, at the life that had come back into her eyes. "You're staring," she said. "I know." "Why?" "Because I still can't quite believe you're real." Elena laughed. "I'm real, very real, and very stuck here until spring, so you better get used to it. I think I can manage." On Christmas Eve, they exchanged gifts. Elias had made her a rocking chair from oak he'd been saving for years. Elena had sewn him a new coat, lined with rabbit fur, warmer than anything he'd owned. "You didn't have to do this," he said, running his hand over the stitching. "I wanted to. It's too nice. I'll ruin it in a week. Then I'll make you another one." He pulled her close, kissed her properly. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Merry Christmas, Elias Crow." "Merry Christmas, Elena Crow." It snowed through the night. By morning, the world was white and perfect, and theirs. Spring came late. The snow didn't start melting until April, and the trails weren't passable until May. But when they finally were, Elena rode down to the settlement with a proposal. She found Thomas Farrell at the trading post and laid out her plan. "I want to start a school," she said. Farrell blinked. "A school?" "For the children here. Most of them can't read, can barely do arithmetic. They deserve better." "And you want to teach them?" "Yes. I was a teacher before I married Clayton. I'm good at it." "Where would you hold classes?" "Here, in the back room of the post. It's not being used for anything important." Farrell scratched his jaw. "I don't know, Elena. People might not take kindly to their kids being taught by what? A woman who stood up to her abuser? A woman who won her case in court? A woman who's been helping people all over the territory?" Her voice was sharp. "Or are you going to say they won't take kindly to their kids being taught by someone who arrived here with a sack on her head?" Farrell had the decency to look ashamed. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He was quiet for a moment, then he sighed. "You can have the room, rent-free for the first year. After that, we'll see." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You've still got to convince the parents." That part was harder. Some families signed their children up immediately. Others refused, citing Elena's past or their own prejudices. But by the time school started in June, she had 12 students, ages 6 to 14, all hungry for something more than what the settlement could offer. Elena taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, but she also taught them to think, to question, to stand up for themselves. The older girls especially took to it. They'd come early and stay late, asking questions about the world beyond the mountains, about cities and opportunities, about whether women could really own property, run businesses, make their own choices. "Yes," Elena would tell them. "You can do all of that, but you have to be smart about it. You have to know your rights. You have to be willing to fight." "Like you did?" one of the girls asked. "Like I did, but hopefully with less drama." They laughed, but they listened. By autumn, the school had 20 students. By the following spring, 30. Parents who'd been skeptical at first saw their children learning faster, thinking clearer, asking better questions. The settlement was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but unmistakably. And at the center of it all was Elena Crow, the woman who'd arrived labeled unfit and had become the most respected person in Clearwater Ridge. 2 years after the Denver trial, Pritchard sent a letter. Clayton Voss was dead. Heart attack in his study, surrounded by financial records showing that his business empire had been crumbling for months. The lawsuits from investors, the scandals from his treatment of Elena and others like her, the whispers that had turned to shouts. He'd died alone and disgraced. Everything he'd built had collapsed. Elena read the letter twice, felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, not even relief. Just a dull sense of closure. How do you feel? Elias asked. Empty. I thought I'd feel something. Happiness, maybe. Or anger that he got to die instead of face real consequences. But I just feel nothing. That's fair. Is it? Yeah, he took enough from you. Don't let him take your peace, too. She folded the letter and put it in the stove. Watched it burn. I'm done with him, she said. Really, truly done. Good. That night, Elena told Elias she was pregnant. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. She'd known for 2 weeks, but hadn't found the right moment to say it. Now felt right. I'm going to have a baby, she said quietly. Elias went very still. You're sure? Yes. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stared out at the trees. Elias? Say something. I'm scared, he said finally. Me too. What if something goes wrong? What if... Then we'll deal with it. Together. He turned to look at her. His eyes were wet. I can't lose you. You won't. I'm tougher than I look, remember? He pulled her close, held her like she was something precious and breakable. We're really doing this? We're really doing this. The baby was born in March during a late spring snowstorm. The midwife from Clearwater Ridge made it to the cabin just in time. Elias paced outside like a caged animal until he heard the cry. A girl, small but healthy, with a full set of lungs and her mother's eyes. Elena held her and cried. From exhaustion, from relief, from joy so sharp it hurt. She's perfect, the midwife said. She's ours, Elena corrected. When Elias finally came inside, he looked terrified. But when Elena put the baby in his arms, something in his face cracked open. Hello, little one, he whispered. I'm your father. I'm going to try really hard not to mess this up. The baby yawned. Elena laughed through her tears. What should we name her? Elias thought about it. Margaret, after my first wife, if that's all right with you. It's perfect. They called her Maggie. She grew fast, strong, and willful and fearless. By the time she was 2, she was climbing everything in sight. By 4, she was asking questions that made Elena's head spin. By 6, she was sitting in on Elena's classes, absorbing everything like a sponge. She's going to be smarter than both of us, Elias said one night, watching Maggie read a book meant for children twice her age. Probably, Elena agreed. We should start saving for university. University? Why not? She's brilliant. She deserves the chance. Elias smiled. Never thought I'd raise a daughter who'd go to university. Never thought I'd raise a daughter at all. But here we are. Here they were. The school kept growing. By Maggie's 7th birthday, Elena had 40 students and had to move classes to the community hall the settlement had built with money from the territorial government. She hired 2 assistant teachers, both young women from settlements nearby, who'd heard about what she was doing and wanted to help. The women who'd come to Elena for advice years ago started coming back. Some to say thank you, some to report that they'd left bad situations and built new lives, some to ask her to speak at gatherings in other towns. Elena went when she could, told her story, answered questions, encouraged women to know their rights and fight for them. You're making a difference, Elias said after she returned from a speaking engagement in Helena. I'm just telling the truth. That's all it takes sometimes. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Elias surprised her with a gift. Not jewelry or flowers, but something better. Papers. Deeds. For 60 acres surrounding the cabin, purchased with the money Elena had won back from Clayton. I thought we were saving that, she said. We saved enough. The rest we're investing. He pointed to the papers. This land is ours now. All of it. Can't nobody take it from us. Elena looked at the deeds, at their names written together. Elias and Elena Crow. We own this, she said wonderingly. We do. All of it. Every tree, every rock, every damn snowdrift. She laughed, kissed him. Best anniversary gift ever. Better than the chair I made you. Different category, but yes. They built an addition to the cabin that summer. A proper room for Maggie, with big windows that let in light. A study for Elena where she could work on lesson plans and write letters. A workshop for Elias where he could work with wood and leather without taking over the main room. The cabin wasn't small anymore. It was a home, a real one, full of life and noise and love. Maggie started helping with the school when she was 10. She'd tutor younger students, help grade papers, organize supplies. She was good at it, patient and clear, like her mother. "You're going to be a teacher," Elena said one day. "Maybe, or maybe a lawyer or a doctor. I haven't decided yet." "You can be all three if you want," Maggie grinned. "I probably will." 15 years after Elena had arrived in Clearwater Ridge with a sack on her head, the settlement held a celebration in her honor. They called it Founders Day, even though Elena protested that she hadn't founded anything. "You founded hope," Mary Alcott said. "That's more than most people do in a lifetime." There were speeches. Too many speeches. Elena sat through them, squirming, embarrassed by the praise. But when it was her turn to speak, she stood and said what needed saying. "I didn't come here to change anything. I came here because I had nowhere else to go, because I was broken and desperate and willing to take a chance on a man who saw me as a person instead of a problem." She looked at Elias, standing at the edge of the crowd. He nodded. "What I learned here is that home isn't a place. It's not a building or a town or even a piece of land. Home is what you build with the people who choose to stand beside you, who see you at your worst and stay anyway, who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself." She paused. "I was labeled unfit, unwanted, thrown away like garbage. And this place, these people, saw that label and said it didn't matter. You gave me a chance. You gave me a home, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to give that to others." The applause was thunderous. That night, after the celebration was over and the crowds had gone home, Elena and Elias sat on their porch watching the stars. "You did good today," he said. "I just told the truth." "That's what I mean." Maggie came out wrapped in a blanket. "Can't sleep." "Come here," Elena said, making room. Maggie settled between them. "Do you ever regret it, coming here?" "Never," Elena said immediately. "Not even once?" "Not even once." "What about you, Papa?" Elias looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the life he'd built from the ashes of the one he'd lost. "Not for a second," he said. They sat there together, three people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd built something lasting from broken pieces, who'd turned rejection into belonging. The stars wheeled overhead, the mountains stood silent and eternal, and in the cabin behind them, the fire burned warm and steady. Home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. And that was enough.